for all the match strikers.
This is Spiritual Pyro. Okay, so we have just kind of a really good conversation to have today. I'm actually really looking forward to this one because it feels like it's really the core of the deconstruction conversations that we've been swirling, and because it's the grief part. It's the hard part. It's the liminal space. It's the in between. We've set down the things that we thought we knew for sure, and the time when we hadn't yet picked up anything else. And all of that feels like the meat of the conversation. And I just feel like the responses that we have received online, in DMs and texts, in comments, some of those conversations that we've been having with people feel like this is the part that's the hardest. This is the part that maybe people don't talk about as much. The part that maybe feels the loneliest. So I don't know, in a weird way, I'm kind of looking forward to this part of the conversation the most.
That's very un-7 of you. Very un-Enneagram 7 of you to be like, let's talk about the hard, sad part. But maybe very evolved, right? This is like a healthy thing. This is good. This is way more in my wheelhouse as a 4. I'm like, let's get into the saddest, darkest, hardest parts.
I know. Well, you know how many times I'm like, am I even a 7 anymore? Is that, and then obviously that's the most 7 thing of me to say is, am I even a 7 if I'm talking about grief, right?
Very true. Very true.
So that's funny.
But yeah,
that's funny.
I think the language, even the phrasing of referring to this grief as kind of a phantom grief or a phantom faith, a phantom aching, I just feel like that's such an accurate portrayal of that feeling of reaching for something that's brought comfort or familiarity for so long and then finding it not there, or finding it changed or you changed. Regardless, there's a change, and change initiates grief. Even if it's a good grief, even if it's important, right? It's still difficult.
Yeah. Even just, a surface look at the idea of a phantom limb or phantom pain and a very real sensation that anyone who has experienced an amputation of any sort seems to be able to relate to in some way. I think that, borrowing that significant sensation and applying it to a change or a loss in something that had been so deeply woven into our identities, our lives, the way that we move throughout the world, to then be missing that, like you said, to reach for it in a moment, whether it's in a moment of difficulty or decision making, or even in a moment of hope, and it not be there, that painful sensation of, what do I reach for? How do I steady myself? What is it that moors me? What is it that keeps me buoyant? I have had so many moments. We've talked so much about how deconstruction isn't just like this one massive response to a difficult moment. It's been this ongoing questioning, searching, pushing and pulling, unraveling. It's been we've always been deconstructing in some way. So this idea that then we reach for something and one day realize it's really no longer there in the way that it always was. I don't know about you, but I can think of so many moments where that was a little unnerving, that was a little unsettling, or maybe even scary, but definitely lonely for me to not know what it is that I would then depend on or seek. And I'll say for myself, I think that one of the hardest parts of deconstruction and the phantom faith was realizing in those moments that it was just me, that I had outsourced my decision making. I had outsourced my hope. I had outsourced my intuition for so long that to then be left knowing that it was just me. I was the one I'd been waiting for. That wasn't a powerful phrase at first. It was like, uh-oh, I'm the one I've been waiting for. This is up to me. Like, oh shit. Like, I really liked having something else I could reach for outside of myself, but really coming to that place of needing to reach in instead of out. That took some new musculature. That took some learning. How about you?
Yeah. No, I think that's so profound because really I'm thinking of a few different moments when out of deconstruction, you're going, I'm thinking of a time actually where I experienced real loss when my husband Steve's dad passed away. And it was after we'd gone through everything we'd gone through at our church in Illinois and moved to Arizona. We were a few months into sort of trying to establish a new normal there. And his father passed away after a long, challenging battle with leukemia. And it was a loss that we had anticipated at some point, and yet you're never really ready when you face it, right? And that coming out of having experienced so much loss, it just felt so overwhelming. It was like coming to the end of myself and not having anything more to reach for. And those are moments in the past when I would have reached for the church. I would have reached for my faith. I would have reached for some comfort and some certainty in the midst of so much loss and unknown. And I actually tried. I found a local church, and I have this very specific memory of, wanting that comfort. I wanted the worship songs. I wanted the sense of familiarity and predictability, and just you walk in, you know how it's going to feel. You're going to be met with kindness, the whole thing, right? And I had a massive panic attack as soon as I got into the sanctuary. It was, I still can feel that anxiety where it was really just my whole being was saying, you need to get out of here. Like, this is not going to bring you, this is no longer it. This isn't the thing. And that realization of what I had reached for, expecting to kind of hold me and help me through, wasn't going to be it. I felt like I was floating, right? Like kind of like untethered, like lost at sea, like with no sense of my bearings. And if I don't have this certainty that I can reach for, then what? And letting that question sit, because it's like, then what? And it's similar to what you're saying with like, you're who you've been waiting for. Like that means all of a sudden, I love your language about outsourcing, because it's like all of a sudden, the reckoning of the amount of self-led and self-responsibility that we've handed off to a religion, a system, a belief. Suddenly, we're holding the accountability ourselves and the responsibility ourselves. And we're doing that without the development that would come naturally if that had been our posture all along, right? That at least for me, was like, I felt stunted because I had spent so many years not working those muscles and not practicing and not developing and not growing the way I think I'd like to think naturally I would have. But instead of doing that, I had just handed off so much of that responsibility to the church.
The development piece, like I always think of the phrase related to my faith that there's moments where I recognize my arrested development, right? So I just always love that old show. But like there is so many points along the way where we can notice our arrested development, where we stopped, where we started handing off, where we started abdicating our agency, where we started outsourcing. I just want to take a minute with that panic attack moment. And, as you look back at it now, do you see that you felt a lack of safety in trying to reach for something, trying to reach for the church again? Or did it feel empty? Did it feel like there just wasn't anything there for you anymore? I'm just kind of wondering, maybe as you think back to that panic attack moment, because it's so significant and formative for how you moved forward. What's your sense about that now?
I really think the panic attack was a lot more kind of primal than it was cognitive. I wasn't really thinking about, oh, this doesn't feel safe, or the church this isn't where I'm going to get what I need. A lot of those thoughts came later. Really, in the moment, it was kind of a snap back to everything about this environment is triggering. Everything about this environment is reminding me of what I came out of and what caused myself and my family and so many people that I love so much harm. And I think I guess I just hadn't considered it. I was so desperate for comfort and support in the midst of the grief that I went to the thing that was most familiar, and I didn't really associate. Exactly. It was just like, this is where we go. And it wasn't until I stepped into that space and heard the worship songs that I had to leave. I just had to leave. I remember going and sitting on a bench like outside of the sanctuary thinking I can like get a handle on this. It's fine. Calm down. And of course that does not work when you're like on the cusp of a panic attack. It just makes it worse. And so, ended up just having to leave, had to come back home and find a new way to process grief, to process something hard that didn't require something outside of myself. And that took a long time, right? I think that's a challenge always. I wonder if it will always be a challenge, just because I spent so many years immersed in a type of dependency.
I feel like the comment that you made about something that feels like comfort, and it was that familiar place of comfort. I think that is such a common thread for so many of us, where what religion, in lots of different senses, often is something that provides people comfort. And that's a big reason why we participate in it. So when something that has always provided comfort all of a sudden no longer does, that's so jarring. Your language about feeling lost at sea really resonates with me, because I'm thinking about what I always refer to as my landslide moment, where I was teaching yoga in my living room on a weekly basis when we lived in Thailand. And, I had been doing it for quite some time at that point, and, had regular people in my classes. And, there was always so much spirituality involved in the practice, and, already built in, just in terms of, the tradition of the practice. And then, that was something that I was sharing in the expat community that I was living in. So there was an additional Christian evangelical bent to the yoga that I was teaching. And I will never forget, there was it was a shift. It was a pivot. It was like a before and after moment where I was not the same after. And I had been wrestling with a lot of things while we were there, moving overseas and living in a Buddhist monarchy really forced me to reconcile with a lot of those remaining threads that I was trying so hard to hold on to. You're talking about that certainty, right? I mean, that keeps coming up for us is, damn, I loved my certainty. But I was teaching that class, and I remember being in a shoulder opener pose that had me facing the wall away from the people that were in my class. And the song on my playlist was Robyn Sherwell's cover of Stevie Nicks singing Landslide. And I'd heard that song a million times. I'd heard that version a million times. But in that moment, and in a situation where, or maybe I should, not really a situation, more of an atmosphere where I had been practicing being so connected to my physical self, to my body. The embodiment practices that had become so deeply important to me, those two things together, hearing that song in a moment where even just visually I was by myself, even though in the room I wasn't, hearing those words, I took my love and I took it down, climbed a mountain and I turned around. Like, I mean, everybody knows those lyrics, but if you have a chance, if you're listening, go and listen to Robyn Sherwell's cover of that. It's different. And it was a pivotal point for me. I, in that moment, realized that was not a love song to me. That was a song, that was a breakup song to me and with the church. And I had realized that this sense of patching holes on a ship that was sinking, my own faith, I was so exhausted patching these holes constantly. And that moment of experiencing that song and letting it really, that wave just roll through my body in that moment, I started to cry right there on my mat. It was a very somatic experience. And I realized that I had to stop trying to patch the holes. All the certainty I wanted so much was just me swimming around that ship, just trying to keep the water out. And in that moment, when I let that wave roll through me, I just let the water roll in. And come what may, if the ship was going to sink or float, it wasn't going to be because of me. There was nothing that I was going to be able to do to keep this faith afloat. It either is true enough to float on its own or false enough to sink to the bottom of the ocean floor. And that really had nothing to do with me. So I could rest for a minute. So anyway, taking my love and taking it down, that song, those lyrics was me just deciding to just be done trying so damn hard to keep that certainty intact. I was never the same after that moment. And I remember I was like, how do I finish this class? How do I nobody in this room knows the moment that I just had. It was very internal and very lonely, but it was also really beautiful because it was this giant exhale of you don't have to crawl on your knees, right? That poem that we love so much. Is that Wild Geese? Yeah, like it's okay. You don't have to try so hard. And once I stopped trying so hard to keep it all patched together and keep it all intact, it changed everything.
Yeah.
But it also washed in all that grief started to flood in too.
It's in the midst of the deconstruction, there's a piece that I think we have to make peace with the without having certainty. We have to let it go. We have to let that go. And that is so terrifying. And also it does leave a massive, emptiness and absence that is felt. That is that phantom ache that you reach for and it's not there. And it makes me think of the phrase that you use often, the "I know, honey, I know," that inner kindness that you use for yourself. And I'm curious if what you just shared reminds me of that phrase. And I just feel like it's such a beautiful also moment of like, you don't have to have it all figured out. And you can like open your hands. They don't have to be so tight-fisted. Yeah. And there's like self-compassion in that. There's a sense of like I've been trying so hard, and you get to the end of that and there's this exhale it's all wrapped together. The grief, the loneliness, the uncertainty, but also somehow the relief that comes from not having to hold it all together or keep trying to make sense of something or make something fit that doesn't fit.
That lyric that's in the song, I've been afraid of changing because I built my life around you. That moment was like, whew, like that was me telling the truth about my own life. Like I was afraid of changing, not just because of this idea of God that I had, but I built my life around this. Like if this isn't, like what happens? Like when you said, what then? I'm afraid of changing because I built I was living in Southeast Asia. I went as far as I could go. I took it as far as I could take it. I literally built my life around it. And what then? If it's not this, then what? Like, what have I been doing with my life all these years? And I think that if we're honest with ourselves, and I say we, meaning collectively, like that's a really hard thing to take down off the shelf when you've invested so many years, so many decisions, so much time, so much energy, so much money, frankly, for a lot of us. Like we've invested so much. And if not that, then what? Right? So that was a truth-telling moment of honesty with myself that I had to admit that I was afraid of changing because I had built my life around the church. And so it wasn't just a loss of a sense of self or a sense of belief. It was also like, what do I have to show for my life if this isn't real or true or good? I mean, whatever word we want to attach to it. Like, if I let this ship sink, what do I have? What then? So I want to honor the fact that there's so many of us on that path of asking that question, and we're in so many different places on that path, and it's hard to tell ourselves the truth about our own lives. And we don't do it willingly. Most of the time, quite frankly, we don't do it willingly, right? Something has to happen, or we have to have a moment, a before and after moment that is a mirror for ourselves. And that was one of those things. So the I know, honey, I know is that open palm on my chest that kind of is what I started to whisper to myself in those moments when I didn't have prayer anymore. I didn't have prayer in the same sense anymore. I didn't know what prayer was. What was prayer going to be if it wasn't this, And I know, honey, became this like little whisper to myself of, it's okay. I know this is hard. I know there's a loss. I know there's a vacancy. I know there's a space that you don't know what to fill it with. And I think what I realize is that I don't have to fill it. Like it's just me in there. Like it's just I can be with myself in that moment and I can just stay. And really, isn't that where With You also originated for us too, right?
Yeah, I was just thinking first of all, I want to hear more about what you were saying about prayer, and what it made me think of was, really I recognized one of the things that I really noticed, like stood out to me post my kind of church life was how when someone that I cared about would share something hard or uncertain that maybe they were going through, my knee-jerk response was to say, I'll pray for you. Like, I'm gonna hold that in prayer. I'm gonna be praying for you. And it came from this deep sense of wanting to support and wanting to offer my witness, my connection, my thoughts and prayers, right? But when I started to really think about and pull that apart and go, what do I actually mean when I say that? What does that mean? And even if it is the actual literal practice of prayer, what is that? Kind of breaking it all down and recognizing so much of my intention behind those words was to express and create a connection with someone that I cared about, to, if they were going through something hard, to help them hold that hard thing, to let them know they're not alone, and to offer support. And that really is where that With You phrase for us has come to mean so much, because that's really what I mean when I say that. That's what I'm actively intending and creating and focusing on when I say that, is this connection, this witness, this support, and where prayer can mean so many things. And I think I experience the connection of something bigger than myself, but it's not like sticking a quarter in the gumball machine and getting your wish, right? It's not like, if I pray this way, I'll get this, or if I pray enough times, or if I spend enough hours doing, if I have a prayer journal and I'm up at 5 a.m., if I do all these things the right way, then I'll get what I want. And if I don't get what I want, it's just God's will, which is like... We can sit in that for a little while.
I mean, that's a whole episode, honestly.
Yeah.
Because really when we, that knee jerk of I'll pray for you insinuates that there is some power to change something. And I think the with you is the even if nothing changes, I'm here. Like that feels like it's a different sentiment. Like, I'll pray for you, at least for me, was always like, so that this thing happens or doesn't happen, you know, whichever applies. It makes me think of the wood carving that is, you know, that is and has been for as long as I can remember above my parents' kitchen window that says, it's a wood carving that says prayer changes things. And it's just been there forever. Like, and nobody even thinks about it because it's like a part of the house, right? And I remember when I started looking at that differently and being like, but does it? But does it? Because when you experience tragic loss, whether it's expected or not, you know, like your father-in-law and his passing, or like when my younger brother passed away years ago, when he died after almost 3 years of a battle with brain cancer, and the grief, I was part of his, you know, care, whether it was emotionally or physically at some point. And it was textbook for me. 3 months, almost exactly 3 months after he died is when the depression and the anxiety and the grief like hit. Like I didn't have the tools. I had not experienced grief like that. I had never experienced depression or anxiety like that. And it completely took over my life. I mean, I was grieving after he died, but it was at that point that I was like, oh, I don't know how to deal with this. I don't have the tools for this. But I remember laying on my floor one night next to my bed, and I had been just an absolute mess emotionally and was really just working hard to make sure I didn't wake up my kids that night. And I was reading C.S. Lewis's A Grief Observed at that point. And I remember there was a part of the book that he's talking with a colleague about prayer. And I think after he loses his wife to cancer, or when she's battling cancer, I can't remember. Actually, it was so long ago. I haven't read it recently. But the colleague says, you know, well, what's the point? You know, why do you pray, basically? And his response back is, prayer doesn't change God, prayer changes me. And I felt like that was a really big shift from what I had always been taught about prayer. And that really opened up. I mean, C.S. Lewis is a very specifically Christian, theologian and philosopher, but it really opened me up to start considering prayer differently. And that got broader and wider and more expansive and more inclusive of what prayer could be. But it also really made me think, like, does prayer change things? What is it that we're doing? So coming back to what is it that we're really getting at when we say that we're going to pray for somebody, especially in those moments when, whether it all feels lost or we're out of control because we are experiencing emotions we've never experienced before and we haven't yet gained the tools to navigate those things. I mean, right now we can look anywhere in the world. You know, we were just in our group chat talking about all the All the while, all of these things are going on around us all the time. And do we really think that prayer changes things? Or does prayer change us? Does prayer change our posture toward one another? And is that really the with you of come what may, I'm here? The linking arms, the hands at each other's backs, the backs against the door, it's all of these postures that that we're trying to communicate to each other that you're not alone, like you said.
Yeah. Oof. Just holding that. There's a timelessness to grief, I think, even as we talk about it, just taking a minute, because I know that loss was so great for you with your brother. And it's interesting how we've both shared stories of loss of loved ones as we're having this conversation about this phantom faith and this grief that comes after stepping away from everything we thought we knew for sure. And I think our bodies hold that. It all feels very similar. It feels like the same kinds of ache. And I think it's really good to honor that. And I think even as we've got people in our lives that are walking through their own types of deconstruction, all kinds, not always just faith, just all kinds. And it's just a good reminder. This is a good reminder of the softness that we need as we're going through the process, because this part, the come down part off of deconstruction is really a bridge, right? It's not where we live forever, but it is something it's a phantom ache. It doesn't necessarily go away either. It's not going to be so overwhelming that we can't live our lives and function. It's not that, but it's just sort of acknowledging and naming, this too is part of it. Right?
Yeah. And that it's universal. So if it's universal, then that means that we all have access to whatever it is that connects us, right? So the idea that one branch of a belief system has the market cornered on how to communicate with this sense that there's something bigger than us, this sense that there is, this presence in our lives or this connective tissue that we are all woven into. Like the idea that one group of people has the market cornered on that is, it's a little silly, because grief is so universal. We all are finding ways to engage what happens when loss visits us, right? You and I both come from high control systems where, or actually, we've talked about that wasn't necessarily something that we're coming from in our childhood, but something that we come from in our adulthood mostly. But we're coming from these systems where prayer and this engagement with whether it's divinity or whether it is love, this idea that the idea of prayer is, or that God's actions are spirit-led, this idea that we can claim that, creates a system that we've seen be ripe for abuse in that sense. So the idea that somebody can have the market cornered on what prayer looks like or what grief looks like or what anything looks like, and claim that that is God's plan or that is something that is spirit-led quite frankly, if you say something is spirit-led in certain communities, it's above reproach. There's no arguing, right? There's no discussion. It's just period. It's so I think even some of the language that we have set down and we've chosen different ways to talk about our experiences of this phantom faith or grief or loss, allow for accountability, like you said before, allow for responsibility, but that also then means that we are then responsible for the decisions that we make. And I think that starts to touch on agency, which you and I talk about all the time. So I'm curious, your thoughts about how we start practicing agency in a different way as we have reconsidered what the core of the idea of prayer actually is for us. So I'm curious what you think about that.
Well, I mean, as you were talking, that was the word in my head. I was like, oh my gosh, this is agency. That's what we're talking about here, because it's what sort of fills the void that's been left from that phantom faith. It's that what we can replace that dependency that was placed so squarely on a system or a religion back onto us. It becomes our responsibility. And also it empowers us toward that agency that, makes me think back to your landslide story of just recognizing, like, when you set it down, it's that come what may, and no one else is coming for us, right? We've got to save ourselves. That mentality, as scary and overwhelming as it is, it's also incredibly empowering, because you recognize you are allowed to take up space. You are allowed to be self-led. You are allowed to say yes. You're allowed to say no. And you are responsible for the consequences, right?
The outcomes. Yep.
Yeah. And I think that the interesting thing to me, what I've experienced time and again, is practicing self-led agency, making decisions from that place, and following through, living my life from that place as best I possibly can, leads to so much more connection. Where there was loss and emptiness and loneliness, the less I know for sure, the more I can set down and the more space I can take up in my own life, the more connections I see and experience, the more empathy I can access, the more I want that with you, and I want to be able to extend it, and I want to be able to receive it. It's just so fascinating to me that so much of what I was grasping for within a system, this community, this belonging, this sense of security, so much of that I'm finding now through this practice of living with my own agency.
Yeah. And that own agency and having a greater capacity for that to open up that space, practicing our own agency also means we're so much more willing to be okay if we get it wrong or if we make a mistake. And how much of a relief that is to not have to always be certain, to not know, come what may. I don't know what's going to come from this. I don't know what's going to happen next. I'm going to make a decision based on my own intuitive, embodied sense of growth and trust. This idea that we couldn't trust ourselves, when we start to realize that we actually can, and we can begin making decisions and plotting a course for our life that is centered in our own decision making, our own agency, like that also ups the ante of what we might get wrong, the mistakes we might make, the things that might not go according to plan, the hard conversations we might have to have. And yet somehow that is so much more beautiful.
Yeah. It also weirdly lowers the stakes of getting it wrong or making a mistake or having to develop those the muscles of I'm sorry or I messed up and sitting with that and allowing that to be true without it meaning there's punishment or you are worth less than you were pre-mistake or that the world's going to come tumbling down because you got this thing wrong. It relieves some of the pressure, and it allows for us, for everyone to be more human, like fully human, not just the shiny parts that you get rewarded for, because that's not honest, right? Even when we get really good at projecting just those shiny parts, the parts that fit best at a church service, right? It's still not honest. The other stuff is still there. We just have not embodied it, and we haven't made peace with it. And this side of deconstruction, this phantom faith is where I think a lot of that happens. It's that in the midst of the grief and the loss and the understanding that what you had before is no longer what you have. And before you find what you will have, the in-between part is where a lot of this work, I think, takes place. That's been my experience, at least.
Yep. And come what may, when we start to understand that at the end of the day, we will always have ourselves, and that is a safe home for all of those parts, only then can we be safe for other people. Right?
Yeah, that's really true. That's very, very true.
So for anyone who has set it all down and doesn't yet know what's going to come next, like, I just feel like we are so with you in that space of belonging to yourself first before you can belong with anyone else. And damn if that's not just the most beautiful place to be. So I'm here for it.
Yep,
love it.
We're here. We're with you. Love that.
You've been listening to Spiritual Pyro with Sarah Carter and Corinne Shark on the 1C Story Network. For more information about this and all of our stories, please visit just1c.com. That's JUSTONEC.com.
Wrap her up. Put a bow on her.
The 1C Story Network, for the love of stories.